Hi, I'm Pam, and I'm here to talk about retro video games. Whenever I show my game shelves in a video, there's always one game that gets a ton of comments. It's been on my backlog for years, so I thought it was finally time to play it. It's Lunar Silver Star Story Complete. Lunar the Silver Star is a JRPG developed by Game Arts and initially released for the Sega CD in Japan in 1992. Executive producer Yuichi Miyagi has stated that the team wanted to challenge the JRPG big dogs Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy. The version I played, Silver Star Story Complete, is an enhanced remake for the PlayStation that came out in 1996. The game takes place in Lunar, a magical land under the shadow of four heroes who not so long ago saved the world from an evil force. Our protagonist is Alex, a young man who hopes to become a dragon master one day. But for now, he's going on a treasure hunt with his money-hungry friend Remus, his weird talking cat dragon companion Nell, and his sister girlfriend Luna. Luna was an orphan who had been raised by Alex's parents, which makes the romance between them kinda weird. Also, mysterious orphan, eh? Wonder if she's someone important. The group delves into their first dungeon and encounters the dragon Quark, who convinces Alex that he should continue to travel the world in search of the other dragons and become the next dragon master. How convenient. As the group travels, they pick up new companions, discover a disturbing trend of singers being captured from villages, and eventually discover that another evil force is trying to take over the world. Lunar is a very by-the-numbers JRPG. Though this version came out in 1996 and it does include some technical improvements, it still feels like a game that was made in 1992. The story, the characters, the combat are all very basic, and the game really doesn't do much to distinguish itself from all the other great games in the genre available on PlayStation. The characters in Lunar are very basic archetypes that you'll have seen many times before. Alex is the chosen one who has to save the world from destruction while not having all that much of a personality. Luna is the level-headed and generous companion who is undoubtedly good and also a little dull, and gets sidelined so the hero has someone to rescue. To make up for Alex and Luna being pretty bland, we get obnoxious characters like Kyle, the thief who is usually drunk, very chauvinistic, and is always fighting with his love interest Jessica. These two spend most of their time bickering. Working Designs, the game's publisher, took a lot of liberties with the English translation of the game, adding in a lot of humor and pop culture references. Much of the humor takes the form of commenting about how men and women, they're so different, right? Eventually, I did start warming up to some of the characters. They talk amongst themselves quite a bit as you travel. When you talk to a townsperson, often more than one member of your party will have something to say. I did like that there was a lot of conversation happening among the group, giving me a chance to know them a little more. My favorite ended up being Null. Most of his dialogue revolves around wanting food, but he's also a great and supportive, yet sassy, companion for the rest of the team. Let's talk about the most interesting part of Lunar: the box. It's a really nice box. Working Designs may have had some questionable translation efforts, but they sure did know how to make nice packaging. I'm convinced the physical presentation is a big part of why most people pick this game up. It comes in a nice box with reflective embossing. The game manual is a hardbound faux leather book complete with developer interviews and partial walkthrough. A cloth map gives a lay of the land. And in addition to the game discs, it also includes a soundtrack and a making of video. When it comes to this genre, my favorites are always the games that do something different and interesting mechanically. Crafting systems, choosing which characters to recruit, building up a base, timing-based combat, fun minigames. Lunar doesn't really have anything like this, and I find myself reaching for something to hang on to. If I have to name something other than the box which makes it unique, it's the fully animated and voiced cutscenes which take place throughout. Most of the game is presented with pixel art. The pixel art is very nice, the colors are vibrant, the backgrounds are quite beautiful. However, it does look like something you could be playing on a Super Nintendo. Character sprites and most enemies are small and not overly detailed, and spell effects in combat leave something to be desired. Every screen you see appears in a single static view. Of course, I'll take this style over most PS1 polygons, but it just doesn't quite compare to the best-looking JRPGs on the system. The cutscenes are the only thing that make this feel like a 5th-generation game. There's almost 45 minutes of video, which is beautifully animated and voiced by a talented cast of voice actors. It's nice to get to see the characters with a lot more detail and have a voice to go with their dialogue. Some are a little on the shrill side, but that seems pretty par for the course. The weakest part of the game is the combat, and combat is what you're doing for probably 75% of your time in game. It's not that it's terrible, it's just boring. When you get into combat, you have the choice of using AI, which you can set up in the tactics menu, or controlling the characters yourself. If you control them yourself, each has the option of attacking with their weapon, using magic, items, defending, or trying to run away. Each character has a main role, like physical attacks, magic, or healing, and will gain new abilities as they level up. At the start of the game, mana is a real problem. Spells and special attacks use a lot of it, and most characters don't have much. Mana restoring items are fairly rare, and when it comes to spending your limited currency on new weapons and gear, or mana restores, I always went with the gear. And often I couldn't afford much of that. There was one point where I had to grind some levels in order to defeat a boss in the sewers, though thankfully that's the only time that happened. The biggest problem is that every enemy has the exact same weakness, Alex's sword dance ability. I used the exact same tactics in almost every fight. There was no reason to experiment or try new things. An ability you have right from the start is always your best choice. By the midpoint of the game, I was using AI to autoplay all minor enemy fights. That got very tedious very quickly. Boss fights were more challenging and required me to actually control my characters, but still the tactics used never changed much. There was just more healing involved. While combat in general was a slog, there were a few things I did appreciate. All combat takes place in dungeons, none on the overworld map. The encounters also aren't random. You can see the monsters on screen, and you only get into battle if you come into contact with them. Most enemies will charge you, so only a few can be avoided, but I still appreciated the chance. The way enemies behave is also used to open up more of the dungeons. You'll sometimes see a weak wall or some kind of barrier that can be knocked down by baiting an enemy into charging into it. The dungeons are usually quite maze-like, which was annoying to get through, but the fact that the encounters weren't random did make that a bit better. I do also like that you can fight with your entire party, up to 5 people, rather than being limited to a smaller number and having to choose who's active. The party tended to change up a fair bit in the first half of the game, which did add some interest to the encounters. Null also takes part in combat when he feels like it. Though the player doesn't get to control him directly, he can resurrect characters who fall in battle sometimes, which is always a nice little bonus that can save you an item. Lunar has a very strange combination of some really nice quality of life features with some terrible inventory and UI design. Let's start with the good. You can save your game anywhere. You don't have to find save points. Whether you're on the overworld, in towns, in dungeons, save where you want. There are also items that let you quickly escape a dungeon so you don't have to backtrack through them. Most areas have a goddess statue, which will restore all your health and mana rather than having to find and pay for an inn. Travel is also made very convenient because you get a fast travel item pretty early on. It can't be used in dungeons, but otherwise you can use it to reach any city or area you've been to before. Between this and no encounters on the overworld, travel in Lunar is some of the most convenient I've experienced, and gives you more of an impetus to go back and revisit old locations to see if you've missed something. When it comes to inventory though, nothing is convenient. Each character has their own 6-slot inventory for items, and the rest goes to Null, who can carry an unlimited amount. Each character needs to have restoration items in their own inventory in order to use them in combat. They also need to have equipment in their own inventory to compare it to what they're already using. If you go to a shop, you can switch characters to see what's an upgrade for each, but if any character's inventory is full, you'll need to spend time rearranging and trading items between them. It just could have been so much easier if everything was shared. My enjoyment of Lunar rose and fell as I played the game. At first, I found it very cliché and basic. As I got towards the middle and started learning more about the characters and discovering new places, I started liking it more, but then in the final third, it just started feeling overly long, and 30 hours isn't even that long for a JRPG, but the combat just got so tedious and samey. Lunar is a very middle-of-the-road game, and if you're looking for a good one in the genre, there are many others I'd suggest spending your time with instead. Sure is a nice box though. If you want to see something I'd recommend instead, check out my review of Suikoden or Star Ocean Second Story. I have a Patreon if you want to support the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.